Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. We are starting our Sunday off right. Weekend watches and everything is for sale. And we're starting off with this, the 40th anniversary of Apollo 15. Now, this, the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch Apollo 15 40th anniversary. For 2011, 1,971 pieces, 42 millimeters in stainless steel. It features the NASA-preferred thermoplastic crystal and a dial featuring the colors of the Apollo 15 mission patch. Now on the reverse, you can see something emblematic, not just of the space program, but of American culture more broadly. We love our cars here in the United States. We love them so much that we brought one to the moon. We thought that given how many millions of dollars per kilogram it costs to go there, it was worthwhile to have a car all the same. So Apollo 15, 16, and 17 all brought the LRV, the Lunar Roving Vehicle. Built by General Motors and Boeing, it was battery-powered, and given moon gravity, it actually had a 57-mile range, which is about as far as you want to go when there's nowhere to go. And it's become an icon of American culture, pop culture, and space travel. So the watch is otherwise a standard moon watch from the period, which means it's very modern. It's got solid center links, solid edge links, removable links are fixed by screws. It is, in all regards, a modern moon watch. We've got a clasp that's thick gauge steel, single swing arm, twin trigger release. The clasp is very much like the Diver 300-meter clasp, but it doesn't have the dive extension. Instead, it has a dual anchoring point where you can move the spring bar and change the anchoring point to fine-tune the fit. And although that might have been the beginning of quartz cars right there with batteries and computers, the watch itself is very much mechanical, featuring a caliber 1861, which is Le Mans based on the Le Mans 1873 Bache, manual wind, 3 Hz beat rate, 48-hour power reserve, and with a combination of a lateral clutch and cam engagement, because that's how NASA likes it, as tough and shock resistant as possible. I should also say that the might of Omega and Le Mans these days is such that the feel and the sound of this cam is as good as 90% of the column wheel chronographs out there. Now, you might wonder why. I mentioned earlier that NASA preferred a thermoplastic crystal over sapphire, and it's quite simple. Sapphire is harder to scratch but easier to shatter, whereas plastic is the opposite. They don't want pieces of shattered sapphire floating around in zero gravity, not just because it makes a mess, but because when all that stuff becomes suspended in the atmosphere in the capsule, there's a real probability that you will breathe it in and get it in your eyes. So you can't have that kind of rock dust floating around, basically. Hence the thermoplastic, which again is easier to mark but harder to shatter. And you can see one of the signatures of an Omega factory Hesalite replacement crystal or original equipment crystal as it comes from the factory. The original Omega article always has that little Omega logo over the hands. We'll throw it on my wrist, get a look at it. It's a fairly large watch. With the end links, it's 54 millimeters across the wrist. It's 48.5 from lug to lug. Take a look at it in the dark. It's a well-loomed watch, and as you can see, it also has a loomed chronograph seconds hand there, so you can use that function to a degree in the dark. So now let's say you want to spend a lot more money on your full bracelet steel sports watch. Well, in that case, I have this. Launched for 2021, this was one of 2 special pieces for the send-off year of the Patek Philippe 5711. So the 5711 generation of the Nautilus went out with a green dial special edition and a Tiffany teal dial limited edition. So this is the Dash 14. This is the green dial model, 8.6 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter. Really has a light and lovely feel on the wrist. The 5980, the 5990, the 5726 annual calendar, all of those feel almost like Nautilus offshores, or at least they are to the Nautilus what the offshores to the Royal Oak, whereas this and the 5712 really feel light, supple, almost dress watch-like on the wrist. Now, a very poorly advertised change for this generation of a 5711 was that it got a new movement. So this has the 26330 SC, which means it does have hacking seconds. We'll do a quick lume shot here, get a look at the watch in the dark. It is a sports watch, properly lumed, full bracelet steel, automatic, and 120 meters water resistant with a screw down crown. On the wrist, it feels light and lovely, super flat flush with a sloped case flank. It will slide underneath the cuff, and as you can see from lug to lug, the edge of the case nowhere near the edge of my wrist, even when viewed from the top, which exaggerates the width across the wrist. This is a lovely watch. And remember, everything on this show is in stock and for sale as long as you're watching it weekend of. So reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com to start a conversation. This is the Patek Philippe that the internet seems to love, whereas I have to admit I'm a bit more of a traditionalist. This is the Patek Philippe that I love. Launched in 2021, this is the Patek Philippe 5738-51G. So we're looking at a watch that is a golden ellipse with a craft art dial. So the dial's made of white gold, and it is hand engraved with a florisant, or a floral design. You see all sorts of different flora, bulbs, flowers, vines, shoots, and then around the florisant, we have black Grand Faux enamel. So all of this fired up to 20 times at 800 degrees Celsius, very difficult to maintain the definition of the white gold engravings while subjecting the enamel repeatedly to the kind of heat necessary to melt it, distribute it, and set it. So this is an incredibly difficult thing to create on two levels, both engraving and enameling at the same time. The watch is just over 7 millimeters thick, 34.5 from side to side, not inclusive of the crown, and 40 millimeters end to end. And you can see it is a lugless watch. Inside, there's a 240 micro rotor automatic, which you might not expect, with a 48-hour automatic winding power reserve. And because it is only 40 millimeters lug to lug, it wears so well on a smaller wrist like mine, and it'll fit on just about any wrist, male or female. It's also super flush, so it will sit underneath a cuff. And then you can appreciate, even from over the top, that this exaggerates the width of a watch, and I'm pulling the strap tight. The lugs are nowhere near the edge of my wrist. A really special watch, and you can see the golden ellipse with its own unique buckle, matching the form of the case. The golden section, the aspect ratio, very, very close here to 1.618. It's not exact, but it is very, very close. Of course, golden section having some inherent aesthetic qualities that make it very visual and appealing to the human eye. You can see that there's satinated hands for better contrast against the dial base. Now, we'll go back to sports watches for a moment, and a watch that's been called the Millionaire's Handshake. The 2006 Richard Mille RM10, which you see here, grew out of the previous, similar but smaller Richard Mille RM5 model. Now the 10 is 40 millimeters from side to side, not inclusive of the crown, and 48.1 millimeters from end to end. It's just over 13 millimeters thick. It's made of carbon fiber, sapphire, and titanium, so very light. Take a look at the bottom, and you can see that there's a curvature to the case. So when you do put it on your wrist, even though it's large and prominent, it feels super light and super slick. You can see the edges of the case are inboard the edge of my wrist, and then the strap wraps all the way around, continuing the curve of the case back. It's very easy to wear, and you could see that it's a good match for me. And even if your wrist is a little bit smaller, you could probably get away with a 14 centimeter circumference wrist with this watch. Looking at the dial, you can see that there are two sapphires. There's the one over the dial, and then there is the one on which the numerals, the frame for the date, and the calibrations for the seconds actually sit. We'll turn the watch off for a moment. You can see that each of those little hour indices is fully luminescent. The hour indices sit on the carbon fiber flange on the inside of the dial, and all three hands are visible, so you know your watch is running. We have a quick set date, we have hacking seconds. You can see that the movement is made entirely of titanium, and it's been skeletonized, and you can see that even better on the reverse side, which includes skeletonized barrels that reveal the mainsprings. Automatic winding with a 55-hour power reserve. The 32-joule RMAS7 is Vache based. You can see it's free sprung with a 4 Hz beat rate for durability. The whole movement suspended by a rubber isolator, so it's more shock resistant. And then you can see that there are little white gold winglets that can be moved in or out. So if you're super active, you don't want to wear down your winding system, your Richard Mille watchmaker can reduce the winding efficiency of that rotor. But if you're really sedentary like me and you work at a desk, you might want it to wind more efficiently, in which case that setting can be implemented as well, and anything in between. A really fascinating watch. You could see that it's got a leaf spring double deployant clasp. This is the leaf spring deployant clasp made by G&F Chatelain, and you'll see it on many, RM, MB&F, many others. And it has a spring action. When you fold past a point, it snaps shut. So, even though it doesn't have a trigger release system, it doesn't need one. It's super secure when it's on the wrist. A really cool trick from one of the neatest watches in the business, and one whose design has become so iconic that even covering up the dial and the brand, you know exactly who made this watch. All right, so 2 dress watches in white metal with calendars, but a million miles apart in terms of character. First, we have the 39mm Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Calendar Meteorite. Now, there is a lot to love right here. First, I'll show you the most unlikely feature of the watch, which is its luminescence. Now let's jump straight into the otherworldly part of the watch, literally from another world. We have a piece of meteorite iron that has been set with Widmanstätten patterns. So oxidized and then stabilized, so no two of these dials, even on identical watches, will be exactly alike. The calendar wristwatch at JLC goes back to at least the caliber 412 of the 1930s, so this is a long-running tradition at the company. We have a radial date with a lunette indicator, we have a day, we have a month, we have a moon phase, we have small seconds, we have applique tri-Arabic numerals, and then blackened dart-style indices. Turn it all over. You can see the movement, JLC manufacture caliber 866, automatic winding with unidirectional action. It's free sprung for durability and precise setting. 32 joules, automatic winding, 42 to 43 hour power reserve. And you can see it's gone through the Master 1000 hours control, a fully assembled 6-position test of chronometry, but also winding efficiency, power reserve, durability, and water resistance. And to that end, you can see JLC dress watches are 50 meters water resistant rather than the standard 30 elsewhere in the industry. Taking a quick look on the case back, you can see the movement is mostly mechanically decorated, but handsomely so, with the highlight being the genuine fire-blued screws. The watch comes with a full double deployant clasp in steel, as you can see, and on the wrist, it's quite compact. At 39 millimeters, I could wear it, you could wear it, just about everyone can, and it's flat enough to wear under a dress cuff, but in steel, it's also casual enough to be your everyday watch. Now, I promised you another calendar watch, but of a different character, and here it is. From FP Journe, we have the latest version of the Quantieme Perpetual. The Quantieme Perpetual is a watch launched in 2013 that got a dial upgrade for 2020. So this is the 2020 to present optional dial, where instead of having the little steel kidney bean bezel around the center, the kidney bean goes away. Instead, we get this lovely blue galvanized sterling silver dial that allows these complications to open up and breathe better. We have an aperture-style perpetual calendar with the day, the date, the month, and then its center, coaxial with the hands, a little stub indicator for the leap year. By leaving the moon phase on the cutting room table, FP Journe creates an unusual type of perpetual calendar, but also creates more room for the calendar indications to be big and legible. Now, the watch has a 120-hour automatic winding chronometric power reserve. That is the time during which it will keep best times. You want to make sure it never falls below 120. Though if you let it go to exhaustion, it will run for almost 7 days, stopping at 160 hours. The movement is entirely gold. 18 karat gold bridges and plates, and then a 22 karat guilloche cut grand dorge or barleycorn pattern on the 22 karat winding mass, a huge balance wheel that makes up in inertia what it lacks in beat rate. It is a 6 beat per second. Chronometer style 5-position adjusted with a free sprung architecture. Journe finishing is getting better and better, and I got to be honest on that front. As you can see that the bevels have gotten more mirrored. They used to be quite dulled and obviously filed with a milling wheel, whereas here they're now finished off for the final step with a little felt-tipped buffer that covers up the milling tracks and creates a mirrored finish. We also have media blast on some base plate structures and engine turning on others. You could see the engine turning more easily. We have black polished screw heads and then circular Côte de Genève stripes across the bridges. Now, a couple things to note about this perpetual calendar. FP Journe wanted a calendar. Forgive me for doing everything backwards with my left hand. My right hand is injured and I wanted it covered for the video. But this watch can be set entirely without tools. Journe wanted a watch that was a perpetual calendar that was user-friendly. So you could see how I'm able to quick set the date. Then in the opposite direction, I can quick set the day. Note that when I quick set the date, I also quick set the day. So you want to set the date first. Now there's another way of doing this. For the month indication, let me see if I can do this with my gloved hand. There we go. There is a little hidden adjuster that sits under the lug that allows you to adjust the month. So Journe wanted this thing to be fully adjustable without tools, and he integrated everything necessary to make it so. 40 millimeters in diameter in platinum with a sterling silver dial and a solid gold movement. It is a heavy watch for a 40. It's not a large watch for 40, it's just a heavy watch for a 40. But I think that is part and parcel to the luxury watch experience. I always like my luxury watches to be heavy. I'd recommend the 40 millimeter case for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. The optional case, 42 millimeters, is even larger. And the watch features a pin buckle. Of course, this is a perpetual calendar, so it does not need to be reset until the year 2100. Leap years, irregular length months, you've got that covered. And note the use of polished white gold hands and applied white gold Arabic numerals that actually wax and wane in size as they move around some of the dial features. If there's one thing Vashon Constantine does well, it curates its history better than the other Holy Trinity. It's true, AP now has its remaster collection since 2020, but they're latecomers to the vintage tribute genre. Patek Philippe prefers to take elements from its history and refer to them piecemeal rather than bring back past references. Vacheron, in comparison, has since the 1980s featured Les Historiques, watches drawn from its past. And in 2015, it gave us the Corne de Vache. So this is technically the Historique Corne de Vache, 1955, and it emulates the 1955 reference 6087, which was built in only about 36 pieces across several models. And by that, I mean several metals. And that's how this watch has been rolled out. The original 2015 watch was platinum. This model in rose gold bowed for 2017. 38.5 millimeters in diameter. It's a little bit bigger than the vintage original, but not much. The Corne de Vache, or cow horn lugs, are what distinguished the original and what characterize this one. The dial features a combination of sunburst graining and opaline or frosted finishing with applique indices, numerals, Vacheron logo. We have these lovely rounded and polished baton-style hands, very historically driven. We have blued hands for chronograph seconds and minutes, and then sunken sub-registers for the running seconds and chronograph minutes. Flip it all over. We have a Vacheron movement based on the legendary Le Mans 2310. So Vacheron calls this the 1142. Here's the changes it makes compared to the Le Mans. First, Geneva seal finish. You see it on both the movement, but also on the case, as it is now a standard for the full watch, and the quality and finish of the full watch, not just the movement. So in addition to fine finishing, Vacheron changes the Le Mans by increasing the beat rate from 5 beats per second to 6 beats per second. It's still a 48-hour power reserve. That doesn't change. Vacheron replaces the mobile stud index regulator of the Le Mans with the Gyromax, or I should say a free-sprung balance. It's not Gyromax style, but it is free-sprung, and all the adjustments are done using variable inertia bolts on the balance rim. Also, an overcoil hairspring shaped by hand is added to replace the flat hairspring of the Le Mans base. We also get 5-position adjustment, whereas the Le Mans comes from the factory as an unadjusted Bausch kit. We still have a combination of a lateral clutch and a column wheel, and you can see them both in action here. This is the lateral clutch. This is the column wheel, and you can see Vacheron caps its column wheel with a black polished Maltese cross. All bridges feature stripes and beveling. All chronograph steel components on this side feature satination across their top, but also beveling. There's engine turning on the base plate. We have polished screws, satinated wheels, and as you can see, there are even some interior angles where bevels meet on the chronograph bridge at center. So it is quite beautifully decorated. The watch is easy to wear, being only 38.5 millimeters in diameter. And you can see on my wrist of 16 centimeters circumference, this is as good as it gets. Super comfortable, flat enough to fit underneath a dress cuff. The strap isn't broken in, so I'm pulling it a little bit tighter than it needs to be. But you can wear this watch on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. And I will confirm that the feel of a column wheel of this quality is second to none. Lanka Datograph, Rolex 4130, Zenith El Primero, and oddly enough, the Breitling B01 is up there among the best feeling column wheels. So this is an elite company, and it's really the standard by which others are judged. Finally, you know, I love to save the coolest watch or a favorite watch or the most spectacular watch for the end of the show. And I hope I'm not letting you down, because this is the coolest watch you will see today, even though we are doubling up our inventory shows. From Longines of Dresden, this is Friedrich III, named after Frederick the Elector or Frederick the Wise. Like all Longines watches, it is named after German electors and royalty, often one and the same, from historical periods. So this watch in stainless steel, 39.2 millimeters in diameter. You can see the onion crown. You can see the shear guard profile to build up the plinth underneath the crown. A triple lug junction. Lugs fixed to the case using screws and bars, no corners cut. The same system used to attach the pin buckle to the strap. Taking a quick look at the dial, it is made of sterling silver and then blued. We have 3 separate planes, a downwardly stepped concentric pattern small seconds, then a center dial disc, then an upwardly stepped hour track with railroad minutes outboard, white on blue, and again the dial is made of sterling silver. The hands are manually cut and finished at Longines, excruciatingly difficult to do. Over a period of hours, they are then filled manually with a material called Heyne, which is a type of ceramics. While it looks like loom, these 2 modified pike hands are actually ceramic filled. But the party, like a mullet, is all on the back. Let's get closer to my light source so you can see this better. This is caliber 5, enormous. At 33.5 millimeters in diameter, you can see it has a very distinctly different style than other, quote, German watches. Let me show you something a little bit more conventional. So another great watch and great brand, but Moritz Grossmann, using the 3/4 style bridge that you see at Lange, that you see at Glasuta Original, that you see it on some of the higher end Nomos watches. But at Longines, they've gone with their own kind of architecture, turning the bridge, rather than a 3/4 structure, into a sort of island that's pared back to the minimum, just enough for the crown wheel, the barrel, and then the drivetrain, which opens up the base plate. And you can see the base plate entirely media blasted, frosted, with free hand engraving, a Burin eye hand, and no guides. We have beveling of extraordinary mirrored quality, and you could see it all the way around this large bridge. You get more beveling than on a 3/4 bridge because there's quite simply more edges. You can also see we have black polish for the screws holding the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel, for the click, which has a wonderful extensible action, as well as the click spring, for the case clamp screws, the swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism, and the cap to the escape wheel. Note the capstone over the balance staff. It is a diamond, a real one. The balance cock is actually made of solid gold and intricately freehand engraved. The balance beaten away at 5 beats per second, 18,000 vibrations per hour. It does feature a hacking seconds function, so you can stop it precisely to set the watch. It also has a blued overcoil hairspring. Take a look at those gold wheels at center. See how they've been internally beveled? You can see mirrored polish inside the wheel. Very rare and difficult to do. And if you go down Can't quite show with this camera because it doesn't have the capability, but the escapement is a work of art by itself. You'll also note that we have fired blue screws. So we have both fired blue screws and the polished ones. Look very closely at the teeth of these two wheels. They've been micro-beveled on their profile, and you could see we have solarization on the crown wheel and double solarization on the ratchet wheel. This is the best finish in the world. There are only 3 or 4 other brands that share the distinction co-equally of being the best finish in the world. This has both style and detail. Also, note the use of blued screws to fix golden chatons, and that the chatons are actually rose gold rather than the yellow gold commonly used on vintage-styled German movements. Everything about this exhausts superlatives. You have to see this watch in person. Now, normally owning something that I would describe as best finish in the world means you're going to be paying Romain Gaultier, Philippe Dufour, and Grubel Forsey prices, whereas with this, frankly, you can pay more for a steel Rolex. This thing is singular. These are the proverbial 100 euro screws. They're that good. Everything about this watch demands that you buy a loupe to properly appreciate it. And if you appreciate it enough to buy, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing of this or any watch you saw today.